But first, we are tracking tariffs as the back and forth between the U.S. and China over trade explodes this week. The president putting a 145% tariff on China, who now has a 125% retaliatory tariff on the U.S. Those new tacked-on taxes now in effect after President Trump's 90-day pause on tariffs did not include China. President Xi now saying he is not afraid of a trade war. But there are some notable exceptions emerging today. Key imports from Beijing not subjected to the new order. And NewsNation's Libbey Dean live for us at the White House to break it all down. Libby, what items from China are exempt from reciprocal tariffs tonight?
It's electronics, Natasha, and the White House appearing to walk back some tariffs on China today, signaling out those exported electronics, now only getting a 20% tariff instead of that original 145% tariff that was threatened this week.
If China continues to retaliate, it's not good for China.
The White House issuing a strong warning to China Friday, only to expand tariff exemptions on China Saturday, announcing electronics aren't subject to the 125% tariff hike on China. But electronics imported into the U.S. from China aren't completely in the clear. They still face that 20% fentanyl-related tariff. The move benefits major tech companies like Apple, Dell, NVIDIA, and Supermicro.
We're talking to a lot of countries, and ultimately, we pretty much can do what we want to do, but we want to be fair.
The White House so far has said that 75 countries have reached out to negotiate these tariffs. But there's been a gap in communication between China and the U.S. as President Trump refuses to say whether he's spoken directly with President Xi since the tariff war began.
I've always gotten along well with President Xi. We had a good relationship, very good. And I think something positive is going to come out of it.
China's 125% retaliatory tariff went into effect Saturday, and China has ramped up its criticism of the U.S. in recent days. A spokesperson for the Chinese Tariff Commission stating, even if the U.S. continues to impose higher tariffs, it will no longer make economic sense and will become a joke in the history of the world economy. If the U.S. continues to play the tariff numbers game, China will ignore it. But the White House press secretary doubling down Saturday, telling NewsNation, President Trump has made it clear America cannot rely on China to manufacture critical technologies such as semiconductors, chips, smartphones, and laptops. At the direction of the president, these companies are hustling to onshore their manufacturing in the United States as soon as possible. And U.S. negotiations with countries, those continue throughout the weekend. And Monday, the EU Trade Commissioner is going to be here in Washington, aiming to strike a deal on these tariffs as countries try and come to the table and negotiate with the U.S. on these tariffs.
Yeah,
Natasha?
and Libby, there's a lot going on. We're also learning more about the high-stakes nuclear talks happening between the U.S. and Iran. What do we know about that?
Natasha, Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is representing the administration overseas this week. He met with Russian President Vladimir Putin Friday, and then today he wrapped up those discussions earlier with Iranian officials in Oman. This is a big meeting that we were looking for in Washington all week. Now, this morning's discussions, the first direct discussions between the U.S. and Iran in 10 years, and Witkoff and President Trump, their message heading into this meeting was Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We've heard the president double down on that and threaten Iran. And the White House has described the talks between Witkoff and Iranian foreign minister. They've described them as, quote, positive and constructive after those meetings. And both sides, they do plan to meet again next Saturday, Natasha.
All right, NewsNation's Libbey Dean live at the White House tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.